You really need to hear what Arthur Vance encountered in those mountains. Because what he saw deep inside Shenandoah National Park will permanently change the way you think about wilderness. In April of 2019, along a remote drainage hollow 3 miles off the Jeremy's Run Trail in Shenandoah National Park, a contract land surveyor set out alone to complete a single erosion mapping assignment before a spring squall rolled in. Everything seemed routine until he stepped into a natural clearing and found the spring peepers go completely silent. Not gradually, not from his own footsteps, but all at once, like something had cut a wire. What he discovered in that silence was bolted directly into the granite cliff face. Government-grade motion sensors and trail cameras, all pointed inward at an empty clearing, guarding absolutely nothing. By the end of that afternoon, Arthur's expensive survey equipment was abandoned in the mud, his wedding ring was at the bottom of a sinkhole, and he had watched a matte black helicopter extract something from behind a false boulder that he still cannot make himself describe out loud to another person. He has not filed a report. He has not contacted anyone. The Park Service has no record of him ever being there. What you are about to hear is the account. His name is Arthur Vance, and this happened to him in the spring of 2019, deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Arthur was 43, a licensed land surveyor on a subcontract to document erosion along the Jeremy's Run drainage corridor. He had $847 in his account and a $4,200 invoice waiting on a client. He was trying to close on a house in Luray before his daughter Marin's birthday Friday. Last day of 6 weeks on this job. He carried a Topcon GT503 on a worn tripod, foam handle duct-taped, $14,000 second-hand and uninsured. A NOAA alert sat open on his phone. Squall hitting the drainage at 4 p.m. It was 12:40. He pushed 3 miles off trail without logging his route with the ranger station. He needed the time. At 1:15 p.m., the GPS battery dropped from 82% to 0 in 3 seconds. Screen strobed twice and died. He pulled his paper quad sheet and navigated by terrain. He spotted yellow flagging tape tied around a birch, triple knot. Nobody ties a triple. A double for visibility, maybe. A triple is deliberate. He followed it. The thicket opened into a clearing. 60 feet across, bowl-shaped granite walls on 2 sides. He shifted the tripod to his other shoulder. Collarbone aching from the carry. That ache was the last normal thing he would feel for a long time. The spring peepers stopped. All at once, a wall of sound collapsing to nothing. The cicadas, too. Total silence pressing on the hollow like a lid. Against the far cliff face stood a massive boulder, mossy, old, the size of a shipping container. His eye moved past it and snagged a razor-thin seam running vertically through the center of the moss, edge to edge, no deviation. Moss grows crooked, cracks run crooked. That line did not. His boot caught a thick synthetic cable buried in the leaf litter. He traced it right and found them. 4 matte black housing units bolted into the granite at chest height, staggered every 8 feet. Solid aluminum. No branding. Hardware sunk directly into stone. All 4 pointed inward, toward the clearing, toward him. Not outward, not watching what approached. Inward, watching what was already there. Arthur stood still as the understanding arrived slowly, then all at once. Whatever these cameras were monitoring, he was standing inside it. Arthur crouched beside the nearest housing unit and did the professional thing. He unclipped his VHF radio and keyed it. Government infrastructure on federal land was not his problem. He would report it, document the coordinates, and leave. The radio produced a flat analog hiss, No squelch break, no carrier tone. He tried once more. Same result. He clipped it back. He pulled his field notebook and started sketching. Positions, housing types, cable routing. His first supervisor in the trade, a retired Army Corps man named Cal Pruitt, had one standing rule he drilled into every junior he ever trained. If you find something in the field that doesn't have an obvious explanation, you write it down, you photograph it, and you leave. You are not being paid to figure it out. You are being paid to measure things and go home. Arthur had always thought that rule was about liability. Crouched in this clearing with the pencil moving, he understood it was never about liability at all. It was while sketching the cable line that he saw the first footprint. Pressed into the soft mud at the base of the boulder, partially filled with dark rainwater, a single impression. Not a bear track. The shape was wrong. Too long front to back, too narrow side to side, with a clear arch and 5 distinct toe pads pressed into the clay. He pulled the Lufkin tape from his vest, measured it. 16 inches heel to toe, consistent toe splay, no claw marks. He told himself it was a prop, a hoax, a fiberglass casting planted as part of whatever the cameras were monitoring. He had the rational explanation fully formed before he finished measuring, and that was the thing that should have scared him. Arthur's brain did not jump to conclusions before the measurement was done. It never had. He pushed that away and looked for the matching print. He found the second one 20 feet out. Same depth, same toe distribution. The heel pressed marginally deeper than the ball, consistent with a bipedal gait under significant load. The stride length was consistent with something considerably taller than a human being. He did not finish that thought. What stopped him was the smell. It arrived all at once, thick, compound, animal. Wet working dog layered over black soil after a week of rain. But underneath both of those things, something older. Something that did not belong in a Virginia spring hollow in April. It did not drift. It did not shift with any breeze. It simply occupied the clearing, dense and stationary, the way a smell fills a room when the source of it is still present. There was no wind. The air in the hollow had been completely still since he arrived, which meant whatever produced that smell was either here right now or had been here minutes ago. He reached for his radio a second time. Before his hand got there, a sound rolled across the hollow from the direction of the tree line to his left. Low, guttural. Not a growl and not a moan. Something that sat precisely in the space between them, modulated, almost rhythmic, like a sound engineered to carry through dense timber without reflecting off it. Arthur had heard black bears. He had heard elk bugling at dawn in terrain not far from here. He had heard the ridge winds that tourists always mistake for something alive. His brain ran through the catalog automatically, the way a trained mind does, methodical, fast, and came back empty. Whatever he was hearing did not fit any category his experience had ever built for him. He looked at the seam in the moss on the boulder. He looked at the cameras pointed inward at the clearing. The cameras were pointed inward. Whatever they had been installed to monitor was supposed to be on this side of the rock, which meant whoever put them there already knew something used this hollow and had made a deliberate decision at some point that watching was the appropriate response. Not removing, not relocating, watching. He closed the notebook. He started backing up. Mountain laurel closed around him like a closing hand. Branches hooked his jacket at the shoulder the moment he cleared the tree line, the sleeve tearing at the elbow seam. The tripod caught a root, and the aluminum frame wrenched his wrist. He yanked it free and kept moving, pushing through the thicket at a pace that was controlled for approximately 30 seconds before it became something less controlled entirely. The hollow floor was a mesh of Appalachian red clay and decomposed granite that the spring melt had turned to something between mud and liquid. His left boot went in past the ankle on the third stride, the clay sealing around it like a mold. He pulled. The boot held. He pulled harder, twisting at the knee, and the clay released with a sucking pop, and he stumbled forward and caught himself on a downed limb, bark scoring across his palm like coarse sandpaper. He registered the sting and kept moving. It was 3:19 p.m. The squall was 41 minutes out. He was 3 miles from the trailhead in terrain he had navigated in by paper map, without working GPS, carrying $14,000 of equipment he could not afford to lose. He moved faster, which was a mistake, because the ground had no interest in letting him. The tree canopy above him moved wrong. It did not sway. It whipped, violent, directional, all the leaves stripping upward as though the air above the hollow had reversed direction. The sound arrived a half-second later, and it was not thunder. Rotor wash. Arthur dropped flat behind a massive fallen white oak before his brain had fully processed the instruction, pressing into the gap between the root ball and the ground. The decayed wood was soft and cold against his spine, wet rot and fungus filling his nose as he flattened himself against the soil. Through a gap in the root mass, he watched a matte black helicopter drop below the tree line into the clearing behind him. No tail numbers visible from his angle. No running lights active, hovering at 40 feet, while the rotor wash hammered everything below it flat. 4 men fast roped down in sequence. They were not in combat gear. Plain dark coveralls, no insignia, no visible agency markings. Each carried what Arthur, after a moment, identified as a tranquilizer delivery system. Not a standard firearm, not military hardware, but the kind of rifle-framed unit he had seen once in a wildlife management demonstration at a Virginia DNR field day 15 years ago. 2 of them were carrying the collapsed frame of an aluminum rail gurney between them. They moved with the economy of people who had done this exact thing before. No speech, no gestures. Short, flat radio transmissions Arthur couldn't hear over the rotor wash. And then they were moving from the drop point toward the clearing at a pace that was neither rushed nor cautious. It was procedural. Arthur's titanium wedding ring, the one his wife had placed on his hand at their ceremony at a Skyline Drive overlook, at a pullout with a view of these exact mountains, caught on a jagged root as he pressed deeper under the oak. The ring torqued sideways off his cold, wet finger and dropped into the dark clay beneath the root mass. He heard it land. He felt its absence immediately, the way you feel the sudden lightness of a hand that has held something for 11 years. He had approximately 1 second to decide. He pressed deeper into the mud. He did not reach back. The 4 men reached the clearing. Arthur watched through the root gap, rain beginning to tap the canopy above him in isolated drops, the leading edge of the squall arriving early, and understood something that drained the last of the warmth out of his chest. These men were not searching. They were not scanning the tree line or checking the cameras or establishing a perimeter. They moved directly, without hesitation, from the drop point to the boulder, as though they had walked this exact path before. They already knew what was in that clearing. They had known for a very long time. The 4 p.m. squall hit 4 minutes early. Freezing rain drove through the canopy in sheets, the temperature dropping fast enough that Arthur felt it as a physical event, cold water finding every gap in his torn jacket and running straight down his spine. The creek bed 15 feet to his left went from a trickle to a moving channel in under a minute. The hollow was flooding. He could not move. The team leader reached the boulder. He placed his hand against the exact midpoint of that razor-thin vertical seam, the one Arthur had noticed and filed away as impossible, and held it there for 3 seconds. A sound reached him under the rotor wash and the rain, a hydraulic hiss, deep and mechanical, the kind a pressure seal makes when it releases after a long time under compression. The entire boulder rotated inward, not crumbling, not breaking apart, rotating smoothly on a concealed counterweight pivot, swinging into the cliff face and revealing a concrete-lined passage approximately 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide, lit from within by a flat institutional light, the color of old fluorescence. The moss was real. The granite was real. The door had been fitted and sealed and left long enough that actual moss had grown on it. Arthur stared at the passage and felt something loosen behind his sternum, a foundational assumption giving way. Whatever was inside that cliff had been inside it long enough for someone to build a permanent structure around it. 2 of the men disappeared into the passage. The other 2 held position at the entrance, rifles up. Freezing rain hammered the rotor wash into white noise. Arthur pressed his face into the root gap and did not breathe. They emerged 90 seconds later, walking backward. The gurney bowed visibly under the weight of what was strapped to it, and Arthur's brain refused the shape for a full 2 seconds, the way a mind stalls on things that have no category. Too wide at the shoulders, too long in the limb. The canvas restraints at the wrists were the heavy-duty kind used for large ungulates, and the wrists they encircled were the diameter of a grown man's calf. The ankles hung off the end of the fully extended rails, extensions deployed all the way out, and still the feet dragged. Matted, dark, reddish-brown hair covered everything, plastered black in the rain, hanging off the gurney frame on all sides in soaked ropes. A heavy burlap sack was cinched over the head with a cargo strap. The chest moved, slow, shuddering. A rise and fall that Arthur clocked automatically, the way a man who measures things measures everything, at roughly 6 seconds per cycle. Sedated, alive. A low sound rolled out from beneath the burlap, the exact same modulated moan Arthur had heard in the clearing 40 minutes ago, and hearing it here, strapped and loaded and diminished, was somehow worse than hearing it in the trees. In the trees, it had been a warning. Here it was something else. Here it was the sound an enormous, ancient thing makes when it cannot understand what is happening to it. Arthur's eyes went to the hand hanging off the right side of the gurney rail. 5 fingers. Thumb angled wide in the classic opposable position, the same fundamental architecture as a human hand, scaled to dimensions that made his own hands feel like a child's. The palm skin was pale, where the hair was thin, almost gray, the color of birch bark in winter. The nails were the texture and color of blackened horn, worn down at the tips in a way that suggested decades of use against hard surfaces. Stone, maybe. Or timber. The team leader keyed his radio and said 3 words in the flat, routine voice of someone reading from a laminated checklist. Asset secured. Moving. They loaded the gurney through the helicopter's side door. The storm broke fully. Thunder swallowed the rotor sound, and the rotor sound swallowed everything else, and the hollow became a single wall of white noise that Arthur used to army crawl backward through the root system. Thorns scoring the backs of his hands, rain driving into his eyes, creek water rising cold against his chest as he crossed it on his elbows. There was no attack, no pursuit, no creature lunging from the tree line. Just 4 men doing their jobs on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in the Appalachian Mountains, filing whatever paperwork gets filed, submitting whatever invoice gets submitted, to whatever agency has a name that doesn't appear in any public directory. The helicopter lifted, the boulder swung closed, the moss settled back against the stone like nothing had ever moved it, and the hollow went quiet. Arthur got back to his truck at 4:47 p.m. He sat in the driver's seat for 22 minutes with the engine off. The rain hammered the cab roof in waves, then softened, then stopped. At some point, he noticed his hands were on the wheel, though he had no memory of placing them there. He delivered the survey data Thursday. The erosion mapping from the first 3 miles was sufficient. Payment cleared Friday. He closed on the house 9 days later, 3 days before Marin's birthday. He signed where the attorney pointed and drove home, and carried boxes until his arms gave out. That evening, he sat in the empty living room with his field boots still on, crusted with Shenandoah red clay, and felt nothing he could name. At 2 a.m., he reorganized his tool storage. Every socket, every bit, every cable tie, sorted, labeled. He reordered his survey stakes by length, cleaned the mud from the tripod leg locks with a cotton swab. He was not falling apart. He was doing the thing his hands knew how to do when his brain refused to process what was in front of it. 1 week later, he drove back to the trailhead with his personal camera. The hollow was clean. Not weathered, not grown over, clean. The trail cameras were gone. The synthetic cable was gone. The moss on the boulder was completely undisturbed. No scrape marks, no pressure points, no soil disturbance at the cliff base, no seam. The ground where the footprints had been was not washed out by the storm. It had been regraded, different surface texture than the surrounding mud. Someone had physically worked that soil within the past 7 days. Spring birdsong filled the hollow. A pileated woodpecker worked a dead oak on the north wall. Creek ran clear. He drove home and said nothing for 11 days. Then one night, late, bedroom dark and Marin asleep down the hall, he told his wife. All of it, the cameras, the footprints, the smell, the helicopter, the hand hanging off the gurney rail. He used the same flat voice he used to read survey data into a recorder. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I believe you." That was enough. His wedding ring is at the bottom of a sinkhole 3 miles off the Jeremy's Run Trail in 6 inches of Appalachian red clay. It is the only physical object that places him in that hollow. He has not gone back for it. He has been pulling FOIA requests for missing persons reports in the Jeremy's Run corridor going back to 1968. 3 hikers, 1 hunter, a Forest Service employee in 1974, last seen entering the same drainage, classified as presumed lost to terrain. He cross-referenced them against federal parcel overlays that do not appear on any public park service map. 11 irregular parcels, same ridgeline, all within 4 miles of the hollow, all clustered on the topographic approach to Mount Weather. On his kitchen wall, he has pinned a hand-drawn topographical map of that ridgeline. In the margin, in pencil, in his own handwriting, he has written one question. How many doors? He lives quietly. Coaches Marin's soccer team on weekends, grills on Saturdays. By every visible measure, a man living a normal life in the northern Shenandoah Valley. Late at night, windows open in summer, he hears something carried on the ridge wind from the direction of the mountains. Low, modulated, rhythmic. He has stopped trying to explain it. In these Appalachian Mountains, some silences are not empty. Some of them are just waiting to be filled.